Nyala Turner stood at the window in the nursery, stroking her visibly protruding belly. 8.5 months. Not much left to go. She carefully straightened the elephant curtain, the same print she and Javan had chosen after 3 hours of arguing in the store. Sunlight filled the room, playing on the freshly painted soft blue walls. "It's going to be okay, baby," Nyala whispered, turning to her stomach. "Soon you'll see what a wonderful world awaits you." The door slammed downstairs. Javan had returned. Nyala smiled, but the smile quickly faded when she heard her husband mumbling something irritably to himself. It was going to be a rough day again. She took a deep breath and slowly made her way down the stairs, holding onto the banister. Javan Turner stood in the middle of the living room, pacing nervously from corner to corner. His dark skin glistened with sweat, and his eyes darted around the room, lingering on nothing. "Those idiots in the office," he said, not waiting for his wife's question. They mixed up the material orders. Now the West Side construction site would be down for at least 2 days. "Javan," Nyala said softly as she approached her husband, "it's not the end of the world. You'll figure it out." "Not the end of the world?" Javan turned sharply, his voice rising an octave higher. "My dad's gonna eat me alive. I was the one in charge of this part of the project." Nyala suppressed a sigh. Barry Turner, Javan's father and owner of Turner & Sons Construction Company, though there was only one son, Javan. Barry always loomed over their lives like a storm cloud. "Maybe we shouldn't tell him right away," Nyala suggested. "Solve the problem and then—" "Don't tell him?" Javan let out a short, harsh laugh. "Don't you know my father? He has eyes and ears everywhere. By morning he'll know not only that, but how many times I went to the bathroom today." Nyala pressed her lips together. Yes, she knew her father-in-law well. Too well. "Okay," she said, trying to remain calm. "Let's just have dinner. I made your favorite ribs." Javan nodded reluctantly and wandered into the kitchen. As he passed the coffee table, he banged his fist on it so hard that the frame with their wedding picture fell. Nyala silently picked it up and put it back where it belonged. At dinner, Javan calmed down a bit. He'd always been like that, quick to flare up, but he cooled down pretty quickly, too. Nyala had learned to live with it during their 3 years of marriage, though sometimes she thought his angry outbursts were becoming more frequent and intense. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, sending another piece of rib into his mouth. "I shouldn't have taken it out on you." "It's okay," Nyala replied automatically. "I understand you're under pressure." "It's my dad," Javan sighed, putting down his fork. "He never gives me the right to make a mistake. You know what he said last week? That I had to prove I was worthy of the Turner name. Can you believe that? I've had that last name for 29 years, and he says I have to earn it." Nyala squeezed her husband's hand. "You deserve so much more than just the last name, Turner. You deserve respect and the freedom to make your own decisions." Javan smiled gratefully, but there was doubt in his eyes. Barry Turner had instilled in his son since he was a boy that he could do nothing without him. Though Javan often rebelled against his father's control, somewhere deep inside he seemed to believe he was inferior. After dinner, they sat on the couch in front of the television, but neither of them paid attention to the images flickering on the screen. Nyala rested her head on her husband's shoulder and said quietly, "I was thinking about a name for the children's studio." Javan tensed but remained silent. "First steps," Nyala continued. "What do you think?" "We've already discussed it," Javan replied, trying to speak calmly. "It's not a good time to start a business, especially with a baby on the way. But you said yourself that you wanted more independence from your father." Nyala lifted herself up, looking into her husband's eyes. "This is our chance. It's one thing to be independent within the family business, and quite another to start from scratch. Do you have any idea how much it costs? Renting a space, equipment, advertising. We have savings, and with my choreography background." "Your experience," Javan snorted. 3 years at the neighborhood dance studio. That's not enough to launch your own business." Nyala pulled away from her husband, her lips tightening resentfully. "So you think I should just stay home with the baby and forget about my dreams?" "I didn't say that." Javan was getting annoyed again. "I just want to be realistic. We can't afford the risk right now." "We can't, or your father won't allow it," Nyala asked quietly. Javan stood up abruptly from the couch. What does my father have to do with this? It's my decision. Really? Nyala stood up as far as her stomach would allow. Then why is it that every time we discuss something important, you say one thing at first, and after talking to your father, you say something completely different? Javan wanted to reply sharply, but at that moment his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and grinned grimly. Speak of the devil. He put the phone to his ear. Yes, father. Nyala sank back onto the couch, watching her husband's face change with every second of the conversation, from tension to irritation, then to resignation. Yes, father. Of course, father. I'll handle it, father, Javan repeated monotonously. Finally, he ended the call and threw the phone onto the couch with force. He already knows about the supply problem, he stated, massaging his temples. Demands that I should be in the office tomorrow morning at 7 in the morning for a serious talk. Nyala said nothing. What was there to say? Barry and Turner always got what he wanted. The next night, they were invited to dinner at Javan's parents' home, a huge mansion in the upscale Kenton neighborhood. Nyala had never felt comfortable there. The house was filled with expensive but tasteless things that seemed to scream the wealth of the owners but said nothing about their souls. Barry and Turner met them in the spacious living room. Tall, with a streak of gray in his short-cropped hair, he exuded that special confidence that comes with money and power. His wife, Gloria, a quiet woman with a permanently absent look, sat in a chair by the fireplace, languidly stirring a cocktail. "Ah, here are the parents-to-be," Barrian announced loudly, clapping his son on the shoulder with such force that he staggered slightly. "How is my grandson today?" "We don't know if it's a boy or a girl yet, Dad," Javan reminded him. "We decided we wanted a surprise." "Nonsense," Barrian said. "I know for a fact it's going to be a boy. The Turners always have sons first. It's in our blood." Nyala mentally rolled her eyes, but smiled politely. "Have a seat," Barrian pointed to the couch. "We have a guest tonight." Only now did Nyala notice the man sitting in the far corner of the room. He stood up and stepped forward, stepping into the light. He was a lean black man in his 50s, with penetrating eyes and a slight smile that didn't touch those eyes. "Kendrick Woodson," Barrian introduced him. "My old friend and business partner. Kendrick, this is my son Javan and his wife Nyala." "A pleasure." Kendrick shook hands with Javan and bowed slightly to Nyala. "I've heard a lot about both of you." There was something strange about the way he looked at Nyala, as if evaluating, studying. It made her uneasy. At dinner, Barrian dominated the conversation as usual, talking about the company's new projects, the problems with suppliers. Here he cast a sharp glance at his son, and the political situation. Kendrick was mostly silent, occasionally nodding in agreement, but his eyes kept returning to Nyala. "So, Nyala," Kendrick turned to her abruptly as Barrian paused to sip his wine. "Javan tells me you're an excellent dancer." "Professionally? I was a choreographer at a dance studio," Nyala replied, surprised at this sudden interest. "Before she was pregnant." "And do you plan to go back?" "Actually," Nyala began, glancing at her husband, "I have plans to open my own studio for children." Barrian snorted loudly. "What nonsense," he said, not addressing anyone in particular. "Starting a business with a baby in your arms? It's suicide." "I can handle it," Nyala said firmly. "I have experience and—" "Experience?" Barrian interrupted her. "Baby, let's be honest. Dancing at the neighborhood studio is a hobby, not a career. Javan will provide everything you and the baby need. You don't need to work." Nyala felt the blood rush to her cheeks, but before she could answer, Javan intervened. "Dad, we'll figure out our own plans." Sure, Barrian smiled indulgently. "I'm just giving advice. After all, I have a lot more experience in business than both of you put together." After dinner, the men retired to Barrian's office to discuss business, leaving Nyala alone with Gloria, who soon apologized and left, citing a headache. Nyala was left alone in the huge living room, feeling uncomfortable amidst the cold luxury of the house. After a while, she decided to take a walk in the garden to unwind a bit. The evening was warm, and the stars shone brightly in the cloudless sky. Nyala was walking slowly along the manicured paths, breathing in the scent of the flowers. when she heard voices coming from the open window of Barion's study. "She's changing him, Kendrick," Barion said with poorly concealed irritation. "Javan never questioned my decisions before, and now? Now he's talking about his own way, about independence. And it all started with the arrival of this dancer." "She seems like a nice girl," Kendrick said cautiously. "Pleasant," Barion snorted. "Maybe. But she's not our type, Kendrick. She doesn't understand business, how money works. All she knows is dancing and how to woo my son." "Barion, they're adults. I've been building this company for 25 years. Barion's voice rose. 25 years of hard work to secure my son's future, and I'm not going to let some upstart ruin it." There was a pause, then Kendrick's voice quieter. "What do you suggest?" "Nothing yet," Barion answered. "But I'm afraid, Kendrick. I'm afraid that when the baby comes, she'll put Javan out of business for good. She's already planted these ideas about owning his own business in his head." "You can't control him forever," Kendrick pointed out. "I can and I will," Barion said firmly. "He's my son, and he's going to stay in the family business whether he wants to or not." Nyala backed away from the window, her heart racing. She'd always known Barion disapproved of their marriage, but she'd never realized his dislike for her was so strong. In the study, the conversation took a new turn. "Speaking of control," Kendrick's voice sounded thoughtful, "you've always been good at it. Remember Lorraine?" There was a long pause. "Don't you dare mention her name," Barion said quietly and threateningly. "I'm sorry," Kendrick said quickly. Sometimes I think about those times. The past should stay in the past." Barion cut him off. "Lorraine made her choice. She chose me, not you. It's been 30 years, Kendrick. It's time to let it go." "Lorraine?" Nyala frowned. That was Javan's mother's name. She'd died of cancer when Javan was only 15, so Kendrick was in love with her? And she'd chosen Barion? It explained a lot. The way Kendrick looked at her, Nyala, as if seeing her as a ghost of the past, and this strange tension between the two men hidden behind a facade of friendship. Nyala hurried back into the house, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. In the living room, she ran into Javan, who was looking for her. "There you are," he said with relief. "I was already worried. Just stepped out for some fresh air." Nyala forced herself to smile. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah." Javan looked tense. "My dad wants me to take over a new project on the north side of town. Says it's a great opportunity to show what I can do." "What did you say?" "That I'd think about it." Javan ran a hand through his short-cropped hair. "This project will take at least a year, Nyala, with irregular hours and constant traveling." "I mean, you'll barely see the baby for the first year of its life?" Nyala said quietly. "I know." Javan looked unhappy. "But Dad says it's a chance for career advancement." "Javan?" Nyala took his hands. "You have to decide what's more important, a career with your father's company or our family." Before Javan could respond, Barion and Kendrick entered the living room. Barion looked his usual confident, commanding self, but Kendrick seemed strangely pensive, his gaze back on Nyala with a kind of pained interest. "We're going home," Nyala said firmly, turning to her husband. "I am tired." They were silent on the way home. Javan was absorbed in his own thoughts, and Nyala didn't want to start a conversation that would inevitably turn into an argument. But as they pulled up to the house, she felt a sharp pain in her lower abdomen. "Javan," she breathed out, grabbing her stomach. "I think it's starting." "What?" Javan looked at her in confusion. Then he realized, "Labor? But it's still early." 2 weeks. Nyala clenched her teeth against a new wave of pain. "It's normal for a first labor. We need to go to the hospital. Now." Javan swerved the car, almost hitting a pole, and sped toward the city hospital. His face was contorted with panic. "It's going to be okay," Nyala repeated, more to herself than to him. "It's going to be okay." But looking at her husband's frightened face, she couldn't shake the strange premonition. Something told her that nothing would ever be all right again. Never. The fluorescent lights of the maternity ward corridor glared mercilessly at Javan Turner's haggard face 26 hours. That's how long he'd spent inside these walls, shuttling between the waiting room and the coffee machine. 26 hours without sleep, 26 hours of mounting anxiety. Nyala's labor was complicated. Premature but not critical, said the doctor, a tall, gray-haired man with tired eyes. But something had gone wrong. Javan didn't understand the medical terms the medical team was using as they hurried his wife into the operating room. Javan sank into a hard plastic chair and covered his face with his hands. He felt completely helpless. All his usual defense mechanisms, anger, irritation, aggression, were useless here in this world, where people in white coats ruled. "Son!" His father's voice brought Javan out of his daze. Barry Turner was striding down the hallway, his face worried, but his eyes cold, assessing. "How is she? How's the baby?" "I don't know." Javan stepped up to meet his father. "They're not saying anything. Took her into surgery an hour ago." Barry put his hand on his son's shoulder, a gesture that should have been supportive, but somehow always felt like pressure to Javan. "Everything will be all right," Barry said in a tone that was unobjectionable, as if even nature wouldn't dare contradict his will. "The Turners are a strong family, and your wife, she's young, healthy." The last words were spoken with a barely perceptible pause, as if Barry wanted to say something else about Nyala. "You shouldn't have come," Javan said, not knowing why. "You had an important meeting with the investors today." "It's nothing," Barry dismissed it. "I rescheduled it. Family's more important. Family is more important." How often had Javan heard those words from his father? And how often did they mean, "Do what I say, because I'm family"? They sat down next to each other in the waiting area. Barry immediately pulled out his phone and started going through his email, sending short messages every now and then. Even here in the hospital, at the birth of his first grandchild, business wouldn't let him go. "You look awful," Barry said without looking up from the screen. "Go wash your face. I'll call you if there's any news." Javan wanted to object, but fatigue took its toll. He headed for the restroom at the end of the hallway. The cold water refreshed him a little, but when he looked in the mirror, he hardly recognized himself. Sunken eyes, stubble covering his cheeks, a look of utter confusion. When Javan returned, he found his father doing something strange. Barry was typing rapidly on the phone, his face a strange satisfaction. When he noticed his son, he hurriedly put the phone back in his pocket. "Have the doctors come yet?" Javan asked, sinking into a nearby chair. "Not yet." Barry paused for a moment, then continued, as if resolved. "Son, there's something I need to show you. I didn't want to do it now, but it might be important." He pulled out his phone again, and after a few swipes of his finger, he held it out to Javan. "Kendrick sent me this morning," Barry said with deliberate reluctance. "I don't know what to think." Javan picked up the phone. A message from Kendrick was open on the screen. "I can't wait to see her again. Our meetings are the best thing that's happened to me in years. She's so special. I'm sorry, man. I know she's your son's wife, but I can't stop thinking about her." Javan stared at the message incomprehensibly. "What is it?" he asked hoarsely. "Kendrick and Nyala," Barry said quietly, looking away. "I didn't want to tell you. I thought it was just his fantasy. Kendrick's always been weird, you know. But after talking to him last night, I'm worried, son." "You're talking nonsense." Javan returned the phone to his father, but his hands were shaking slightly. "Nyala and Kendrick, they barely know each other. Kendrick said they met a few times when you were at work." Barry spoke softly, as if comforting a child. "At first I thought he was just visiting you on company business. But he sent this message this morning, and now I don't know what to think." Javan shook his head, refusing to believe it. But the seed of doubt had already been planted. His sleep-deprived brain began to recall moments from the past few months. Nyala answering the phone and going straight to the other room, her unexpected trips downtown to go shopping, the strange detachment that sometimes appeared in her gaze. "It's bullshit," Javan said firmly, more to himself than to his father. "Nyala's not like that." "Of course she is," Barry agreed quickly. "It's probably all Kendrick's fantasies. Forget that I showed you this. Bad timing on my part." But Javan couldn't forget anymore. The thought of a possible connection between his wife and his father's friend crawled into his mind like a poisonous snake and coiled there, ready to attack at any moment. At that moment, the doctor, the same gray-haired man with the tired eyes, approached them. "Mr. Turner?" He turned to Javan. "You have a son, a healthy boy, 3 pounds, 800 grams. Javan felt a wave of relief surge through his body. "And your wife? How's Nyala?" "She had a tough time, but she made it through." The doctor smiled slightly. "They're moving her to her room now. You should be able to see her in half an hour." The doctor nodded and left. Javan sank into a chair, feeling a strange mixture of joy and anxiety. A son. He had a son, but the thought of Nyala's possible infidelity didn't let him go. "Congratulations, son!" Berrien clapped him on the shoulder. "You're a father now. A great responsibility." At that moment, Kendrick Woodson himself appeared in the hallway. He walked quickly toward them, a wide smile on his face. "Do you know already?" he exclaimed as he approached. "I just met the nurse and she said it's a boy." "Yes," Berrien nodded. "Javan has become a father." Kendrick turned to Javan, and for a moment there was something strange in his eyes, almost guilty. "Congratulations," he said, holding out his hand. "It's a great day." Javan mechanically shook the outstretched hand, scrutinizing Kendrick's face. He held himself a little uncertainly, avoiding a direct gaze. "Thanks for coming," Javan said, not hiding the suspicion in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Of course you did," Kendrick smiled nervously. "I couldn't miss it." "Javan," Kendrick began, clearly choosing his words. "I know this isn't the best moment, but I have a confession to make." "What is it?" Javan felt his anger rising inside him. "Nyala and I—" Kendrick hesitated, then continued with feigned determination. "We had a connection. Nothing serious, just— I didn't mean for it to happen, but—" Javan jumped up from his chair, his fists clenched involuntarily. "You're lying," he said through gritted teeth. "Son, calm down." Berrien put his hand on Javan's shoulder. "We're in the hospital." "I'm not lying," Kendrick said quietly, his voice sounding almost convincing. "I'm sorry, Javan. I really am." Just a day ago, Javan wouldn't have hesitated to punch a man who dared speak of his wife that way. But now, exhausted from a sleepless night, with a head full of doubts sown by his father, he only glared at Kendrick, unable to find the words. "When?" he finally squeezed out. "The last few months," Kendrick answered, averting his gaze. "When you were at work. We'd meet downtown, sometimes at your place." "Why are you telling me this?" Javan asked, his voice shaking with contained anger. "Now that she'd just given birth?" "Because the baby—" Kendrick hesitated, casting a quick glance at Berrien. "I'm not sure it's yours, Javan." Just 24 hours ago, this scene had taken place in Berrien's office. He was sitting at a massive desk, Kendrick across from him, tapping his fingers nervously on the armrests of his chair. "You want me to do what?" Kendrick asked, disbelieving his ears. "Just hint that you and Nyala were having an affair," Berrien repeated, his voice calm, as if he were discussing a routine business transaction. "Nothing specific, just create doubt." "But why?" Kendrick shook his head. "She's pregnant. She's about to give birth." "That's why," Berrien stepped forward. "Javan is completely under her influence. He's talking about getting out of the business, starting his own thing with that dance studio of hers. But it's his life, Berrien," Kendrick said carefully. "His choice." "His choice?" Berrien snorted. "Kendrick, his choice is the result of this woman's manipulation. She rounded him up, got him pregnant, and now she thinks she can destroy what I've spent years building." "What are you trying to accomplish with that?" Kendrick asked. "I just want him to see the real her, to realize that you can't trust a woman who came out of nowhere and turned his head." "It's cruel, Berrien," Kendrick shook his head, "especially now that she's in labor." "Cruel?" Berrien grinned. "You know what's cruel? When a woman takes a son away from his father, when she ruins plans that have been made for years. That's cruel." "I can't do it," Kendrick finally said. "I'm sorry, Berrien, but it's too much." Berrien rose slowly from the table, his face hard. "You can't?" he interjected quietly. "What about that loan I gave you 5 years ago? The one that saved your ass from bankruptcy?" You still owe me $250,000, Kendrick, with interest. Kendrick went pale. Are you, blackmailing me? I'm reminding you of your business obligations, Berrien said coldly, and that friends help each other. I helped you then. Now it's your turn. Now, standing in the hospital corridor in front of a furious Javon, Kendrick felt like the ultimate scumbag. But it was too late to back down. Javan, Berrien intervened, stepping between them. This is neither the time nor the place. I think you need to see Nyala and the baby. Talk to her. Ask her straight out. If Kendrick is lying, she'll say so. Javan shifted his gaze from Kendrick to his father, then nodded as if in a trance. Yes, he said quietly. I'll talk to her. At that moment, a nurse, a young woman with a bright smile, approached them. Mr. Turner? She addressed Javan. Your wife is in the room. You may visit her. As they walked away, Berrien turned to Kendrick. Good work, he said quietly. Very convincing. I don't like it, Kendrick replied, wiping his sweaty forehead. It looks unstable. He's just tired, Berrien said. He'll have a little fight with his wife, blow off some steam. Then he'll realize that the family business is the only reliable thing in the world. They were about to leave when Berrien stopped a passing nurse, not the one who'd taken Javan away, but an older, tired-looking one. Excuse me, Berrien said, instantly turning on his charm. Could you do me a small favor? I'll thank you generously. The nurse looked at him appraisingly, noting the expensive watch, the impeccable suit. What favor? Berrien leaned toward her and whispered something in her ear. The nurse frowned, then shrugged. 500, she said briefly. Berrien pulled out his wallet, counted out 5 bills, and discreetly handed them to the nurse. Right now, he said. It's important. Meanwhile, Javan entered the room where Nyala was lying. She looked exhausted but happy. Next to her in a clear crib lay a tiny bundle, their son. Javan, Nyala smiled, holding out her hand to him. Come here, look at him. He's so beautiful. Javan slowly approached the crib. The newborn's little face was wrinkled, eyes tightly closed. Son, Javan whispered, and for a moment all doubt receded before the miracle of new life. But then Kendrick's words echoed in his head again. I'm not sure he's yours. Javan stared into the tiny face, trying to find his features. Are you okay? Nyala asked, noticing the strange expression on his face. You look upset. I'm just tired, he finally said. It's been a long night. Come here. Nyala patted the edge of the bed. Sit down next to me. Have you thought of a name yet? Nyala asked, taking his hand. I was thinking of Malik. What do you think? Malik, Javan repeated, tasting the name. It's a good name. Is your father here? Nyala asked. I heard the nurse talking about visitors. Yes, Javan nodded. He's here, and Kendrick too. He scrutinized the expression on her face when he said Kendrick's name. Kendrick? Nyala interjected. Why did he come here? I don't know. Javan tried to speak casually. Maybe you do know? Nyala frowned. What do you mean? Before Javan could answer, a nurse entered the room, the same one Berrien had just spoken to. How are you feeling, Mrs. Turner? She asked, approaching the bed. Tired but happy, Nyala replied with a smile. That's understandable. The nurse checked the IV, then turned to Javan. And you must be a proud father? Javan nodded, not trusting his voice. Oh, by the way, the nurse added casually, heading for the exit. Your friend Kendrick has already come by to visit your wife a few times while you've been away. So thoughtful. The words hung in the air like poison gas. The nurse, pleased with the effect, walked out, leaving the couple alone. What? Nyala looked completely confused. Kendrick who? I didn't... Don't lie to me! Javan jumped up from the bed, his face contorted with anger. I know everything! He confessed to me! What are you talking about? Nyala sounded genuinely horrified. Javan, I don't understand! Your betrayal! Javan shouted. About you sleeping with Kendrick, that this baby might not be mine! What? Nyala tried to lift herself up on the bed, but she was too weak after giving birth. Are you out of your mind? I never cheated on you. At that moment, the newborn cried, as if sensing the tension between the parents. His cry, shrill and demanding, made Javan even more agitated. "Shut up!" he shouted toward the crib, then turned to Nyala again. "All this time, all these months, you've been leading me around by the nose. Javan, please!" Nyala reached out to him. "Calm down. Let's talk reasonably. I don't know why Kendrick lied, but he didn't lie." Javan slammed his fist on the wall. "He showed me your messages." The baby's cries grew louder and louder. Nyala, seeing her husband's condition, pressed the nurse call button. "Javan, you're not yourself," she said, trying to speak calmly. "You're tired. You've been up all night. Let's talk later when you've calmed down." "No!" Javan stepped closer to the bed, hovering over his wife. "We're gonna talk now. I want the truth. I'm telling you the truth." Nyla's eyes were filled with tears. "I swear on our child, I never cheated on you." Something in her eyes, in the tone of her voice, made Javan doubt for a moment. Perhaps she was telling the truth? Could it be that Kendrick was lying? But why? But before he could contemplate that thought, the baby's cries escalated into a piercing scream, as if cutting through the last thin threads of his self-control. Javan turned to the crib, then back to Nyala, his face contorted with rage. "Shut him up!" he shouted. "Shut him up! He's just hungry." Nyala tried to sit up. "Let me take him." "No!" Javan grabbed her by the shoulders, holding her in place. "Tell me the truth first! I already told you the truth!" Nyala shouted, trying to free herself. "Let me go! You're hurting me!" But it was as if Javan didn't hear her. His head was filled with his father's words, with Kendrick's words, with the sound of a baby crying. A baby that might not have been his. It was a cacophony that grew louder and louder until it was unbearable. "Shut up!" he shouted, not knowing whether he was addressing Nyala or the baby. "Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!" His hands closed around Nyala's neck. He didn't even realize what he was doing until he saw the terror in her eyes, until he felt her desperately trying to push him away. Somewhere in the periphery of his consciousness, he heard the door open, someone screaming, but it was too late. His hands clenched tighter and tighter, and life was fading in Nyala's eyes. In the hallway, Barrion and Kendrick heard the screams and rushed toward the ward. When they ran inside, they saw the nurse frozen in terror at the door, and Javan leaning over Nyala's lifeless body, his hands still clutching her neck. "Jesus," Kendrick breathed out. "What have you done?" Barrion looked at his son with an expression of shock on his face. This wasn't part of his plan. He wanted to destroy the marriage, not kill his daughter-in-law. "Javan," he whispered, taking a step forward. "Son." Javan turned slowly toward them, his eyes empty, as if everything human in him had died with Nyala. "She lied," he said quietly. "All the time, she lied." Kendrick backed toward the door, his face white with horror. He realized that he had been an accessory to murder, that his lies had led to this tragedy. And in a crib nearby, a newborn baby continued to cry, a son destined to be orphaned on the first day of his life. Detective Siobhan Drake hated domestic violence cases, but those were the kind of cases she got most often at the Kenton Police Department. Drake was a professional. 38 years, 15 of them on the force, the last 7 in homicide. She'd seen enough to know that sometimes the worst crimes were committed by people who'd sworn to love each other for the rest of their lives. Turner's case seemed painfully typical. A husband, in a fit of jealousy, had strangled his wife right in her hospital room, hours after she'd given birth to their firstborn. Javan Turner was arrested at the scene, offered no resistance, and seemed to be in a state of shock. Drake arrived at the hospital 40 minutes after the murder. By then, Nyala Turner's body had already been covered with a sheet, and her killer had been placed in handcuffs and taken to the station. In the hallway outside the ward, Drake found 2 men, an elderly man and a middle-aged man. They introduced themselves as Barrion Turner, the suspect's father, and Kendrick Woodson, a family friend. Both looked shaken, especially Kendrick. His hands were visibly shaking and his face was pale as a sheet. "My son, he's not himself," Barrion said, his voice muffled. "He hasn't slept in over 24 hours, waiting for the baby to be born." "We'll talk about this later, Mr. Turner," Drake replied, making notes in her notebook. "Right now I need witnesses. Did anyone see what happened in the room? A nurse, Kendrick said quickly. She ran into the room and saw him. He stopped, unable to say the words. All right, I'll talk to her. Drake nodded. Were you two out here in the hallway? Yes, Berrien confirmed. We heard the screams and rushed into the room, but it was already... He paused, as if searching for words. Too late. Drake looked at the two men carefully. Something in their demeanor alarmed her, but she couldn't pinpoint what it was. Perhaps just the natural shock of what had happened. I need both of you to come down to the station for a formal statement, she said. The sooner the better. Of course, Detective. Berrien straightened up, as if reminded of his status. We'll do whatever we need to do. But right now, I have to take care of my grandson. Poor boy. The child is under medical care, Drake said. Social services have been notified and are deciding on temporary custody. Does Mrs. Turner have any relatives? Her parents are in Ohio, Berrien replied. We've already contacted them. They're on their way. Drake nodded and headed toward the nurse who had witnessed the murder. The young woman was still in a state of shock, but was able to confirm that she had seen Javon Turner strangling his wife. According to her, she entered the room after hearing the screams and immediately called security. 3 hours later, Drake was at the police station reviewing the initial results of the investigation. Javon Turner refused to talk without a lawyer, but his father and Kendrick Woodson gave detailed statements. According to their version, Javon learned that his wife had cheated on him with Kendrick and that the child might not be his. Berrien claimed that he learned this from Kendrick himself just one day before the tragedy and decided to tell his son, believing he had a right to know. Kendrick confirmed the affair with Nyala, though his statement sounded a little uncertain. And you decided to tell Javon at the exact moment his wife was in labor? Drake asked, not hiding her skepticism. I didn't mean to, Berrien shook his head. But Kendrick came to the hospital and things just got out of control. I never thought Javon was capable of something like that. Never. Drake also interviewed a nurse who Kendrick said had mentioned his visits to Nyala. A middle-aged woman named Rachel Gibbs confirmed that she'd said something similar, though she couldn't remember exactly whether she'd ever seen Kendrick at the hospital before the day of the murder. I was just repeating what I was told, she explained uncertainly. The hospital is so hectic, so many patients. The next morning, when Drake returned to the investigation, the case seemed all but closed. Javon Turner had confessed to the murder. The motive was clear. Witnesses had corroborated the crime. There was a trial to go to, but no one doubted the outcome. Turner was facing at least 20 years in prison. Drake was about to turn her attention to another case when she got a call from the hospital. The head of Human Resources had delivered some strange news. Nurse Rachel Gibbs, who had testified yesterday, had abruptly quit and seemed to have left town. She left a letter of resignation citing family reasons and asked that her last paycheck be transferred to an account in another state. Is that okay? Drake asked. Do people often quit so suddenly? I've never seen that before, the Human Resources manager replied, especially since she'd worked here for 7 years and was in good standing, and it's weird to quit in the middle of the work week without even working the 2 weeks she's supposed to. That made Drake suspicious. She asked the police finance department to check Rachel Gibbs's bank accounts for the last 48 hours. It was standard procedure in cases where a witness suddenly disappeared, though it was usually used in cases involving organized crime rather than family tragedies. The results came back a day later, and they surprised Drake. Rachel Gibbs' account had received a $5,000 transfer from Turner Construction, Berrien Turner's family business. The transfer had been made the morning of the day of the murder, just hours before the tragedy. Drake didn't believe in coincidences, especially coincidences like this. She decided to dig deeper and requested a review of all of Turner's company's financial transactions over the past week. At the same time, she sent an officer to check Kendrick Woodson's address. She wanted to talk to him again, given the new information. But the officer came back with nothing. Kendrick wasn't home. Neighbors said they hadn't seen him in a couple of days. Drake decided to check the local bars, a typical hiding place for people trying to avoid facing the police or their own conscience. At the third bar, she got lucky. Kendrick Woodson was sitting behind the bar of the Blue Goose, a small drinking establishment on the outskirts of Kenton. He was clearly drunk, his clothes looking wrinkled, as if he'd slept in them more than one night. Drake didn't approach him right away. Instead, she took a seat at a table in the corner and asked the bartender to bring her coffee. Then, as if by the way, she nodded toward Kendrick. "He's having a rough time, isn't he?" The bartender, a large man with tattoos on his arms, shrugged. "Third night in a row he comes in and drinks himself into a stupor. Had to call him a cab last night. Mumbles some bullshit about how he never slept with any woman and that it's all a lie." Drake tensed. "Really? Didn't say which woman he was talking about?" "No, but judging by the timing and his condition, I think it has to do with that murder at the hospital." The bartender leaned closer. "You're the police, right? I saw you on TV when they were reporting on that case." Drake nodded and showed his badge. "What else did he say?" "That he'd been forced to lie, that he didn't want it to end this way." "The usual drunken ramblings," the bartender shrugged. "I wouldn't have given it much thought if I hadn't recognized you." Drake thanked the bartender and sat down next to Kendrick. He didn't recognize her right away. His eyes were cloudy with alcohol. "Mr. Woodson," Drake began, "I think we need to talk." "I've already said everything," Kendrick mumbled, not looking up from his glass. "Not everything." Drake placed the printout of Rachel Gibbs's wire transfer on the counter. "For example, you didn't say that Nurse Gibbs had received $5,000 from Turner's company right before you made your statement about your visits to Nyala." Kendrick turned even paler, if that was even possible. I don't know about any money," he muttered. "Perhaps," Drake agreed. "But you know about the lies. The lie you told Javon Turner about his wife. The lie that led to her death." Kendrick covered his face with his hands. "I didn't mean to. Berrien said it was just to teach her a lesson, to make Javon more careful. Let's go to the station, Mr. Woodson." Drake stood up. "I think you have a story to tell. It's official." At the station, after Kendrick was given a strong coffee and an opportunity to call a lawyer, which he declined, Drake began the formal interrogation. She turned on her camera and recorder and clearly recited the date, time, and names of those present. "Now, Mr. Woodson," she began, "you claimed that you had an affair with Nyala Turner. Is that true?" Kendrick was silent for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "No, I barely knew her." "Then why did you lie?" Kendrick took a deep breath, as if preparing to jump into cold water. "Berrien asked me to, or rather, made me." "In what way?" "I had debts, big debts. 5 years ago, Berrien loaned me money to save my business. I still haven't paid it back in full. He said if I didn't help him, if I didn't do what he asked, he'd demand it all back immediately. It would ruin me." "And what exactly did he ask you to do?" "Just to hint to Javon that I was having an affair with his wife. Create doubt. Berrien said that Nyala was taking Javon out of the family business, that she convinced him to start his own business, some kind of dance studio. He was furious. Said he needed to teach her a lesson, show Javon that you can't trust a woman unconditionally." "And you agreed to be a part of this?" "I had no choice." Kendrick raised his voice, then lowered it. "At least that's what I thought. I realize now that I was a coward, that I should have said no, no matter what it took." "Tell me more about what happened at the hospital." Kendrick began to speak, hesitantly at first, then more and more freely, as if confessing. He told of the conversation in Berrien's office, of how the man had blackmailed him, of his reluctant consent, then about the meeting at the hospital, how he, following Berrien's instructions, had confessed to Javon about his non-existent affair with Nyala. "I thought it was just a fight, you know?" Kendrick looked directly into the camera, his eyes full of remorse. "I never thought that Javon, that he was capable of..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "What about the nurse, the one who mentioned your alleged visits to Nyala?" "It was Berrien's idea. I didn't know he was going to bribe the nurse. He just went to talk to her while Javon was in the room. I saw him give her money, but I didn't know exactly how much or what she had to say." Drake wrote down all of Kendrick's statements and had him sign an official statement. She then sent 2 officers to Berrien Turner, demanding that he report to the station for questioning. Berrien arrived accompanied by 2 lawyers. A man and a woman in impeccable suits, with icy stares and polished wording. Unlike a confused Kendrick, Berrien held a confident, even arrogant air. "My client categorically denies all charges," said the senior attorney, a gray-haired man with a sharp gaze. "Mr. Woodson is obviously trying to shift the blame for his actions onto my client. $5,000 was wired to Nurse Gibbs' account from your company, Mr. Turner," Drake said calmly. "That's a fact that's hard to deny." "It was an advance for private services," the female attorney interjected. "Mr. Turner planned to hire Miss Gibbs as a personal nurse for his grandson after he was discharged from the hospital." "An amazing coincidence in timing," Drake observed dryly. "Coincidences happen, Detective," Berrien smiled coldly. "And unless you have specific charges, I'd rather get back to my business. I'm going through a very difficult time right now. My son is in prison. My grandson is orphaned." "Your fault," Drake said sharply. "Careful with the accusations, Detective," the lawyer warned. "Slander is a serious offense." Drake realized that Berrien Turner was not the kind of man to admit defeat easily. With his money, connections, and ruthless lawyers, he could avoid serious charges even if proven guilty. At best, he'd be charged with perjury or solicitation, but hardly an accessory to murder. But she couldn't let him get away with it completely, so she decided to hit the sorest spot. "One last question, Mr. Turner," she said as Berrien was getting up to leave. "Have you already informed your son that his wife never cheated on him? That the child was really his? That he killed an innocent woman because of a lie you created?" Berrien froze for a moment, then slowly turned to Drake. "I will speak to my son when the time is right," he said quietly. But there was uncertainty in his voice for the first time. "Don't worry," Drake smiled without a shadow of warmth. "I've already sent an officer to the jail with a full transcript of Mr. Woodson's confession. I think your son is now getting a pretty good idea of who his real enemy is." Berrien turned pale, but quickly pulled himself together. "My lawyers will be in touch with you, Detective," he said, and walked out of the interview room, accompanied by his lawyers. Javon Turner was sitting in the holding cell when the tapes of Kendrick's testimony were brought to him. He listened to them in complete silence, his face expressionless. Only when the tape ended did he cover his face with his hands, and his shoulders began to shake with silent sobs. He had killed Nyala, killed the woman who loved him, who had just given birth to his son, who had never betrayed him, killed her because of a lie made up by his own father. A lie he had so easily believed because somewhere deep inside, he had always thought he didn't deserve a woman like Nyala. Now a trial awaited him, almost certainly a conviction and years of imprisonment. His son would grow up without a father, never recognizing his mother, all because of the exorbitant greed and control of one man, his father. At first, Javon waited, a week, a month, then a year. He'd even become curious at a certain point when his father would come and tell him the truth. To him personally, looking him in the eye. He had learned to scrawl dashes on the plaster so that they could be seen from any corner of the cell. Father never came. The nights were the worst. Nyala appeared not in real life, of course, but in dreams, real, fleshy, sometimes still with a belly, sometimes with a baby in her arms. "Hello," Nyala said. "This is your son," Nyala said. "Meet him." She would give him to Javon in her arms, and he would wake up, lost. His hands were empty. After another 6 months, he scratched out a mother and child with a shiv on the plaster, a silhouette, nothing more. Next to it, a crib and a lamp on a table. Sometimes he thought the lamp was lit and there was someone in the crib. Then he woke up, jumping up like a dog that hadn't been ironed in a long time. Nyala from dreams would disappear then, and if she appeared, she would grin angrily and accusingly. After another 6 months, he realized. The sun was bright and forgiving. Javon pulled out the shiv, breathed on it, smoothed a thread sticking out in the mattress. An unlit lamp smiled at him from the wall. Nyala emerged from the wall, beautiful, whole, the boy in her arms smiling. Javon smiled back.